welcome to the Stockbury Dark. My name is Peter Morsi.
My name is Klaus, and I'm out here in Stockholm, Sweden.
Yeah, and we are back from a little bit of an extended vacation from the show.
Yes.
We were, we got really busy with our lives, families, work, etc. So we apologize to all our listeners who had to wait a few months for the next upcoming episodes, but we're moving forward. The show is like our number one priority. We have a lot of great things happening with the show. We started a Patreon. If you go to patreon.com and search for Stockbury Dark, you can read all about it. Different reward systems for our donors that could help out with the show. We put a lot of time and money into this. It is not our full-time gig, but hopefully someday we can make it into something like that. But we want to keep bringing you great guests and great things with the show. So anything you can do to help the Stockbury Dark, please go to patreon.com and donate for us, and that'll be great.
Any help would be much appreciated.
Yeah. So we have a very cool guest, Connecticut friend here, Massachusetts native, lives in Connecticut. Kane Galaznek. What's up, Kane? How you doing?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Stockbury Dark.
Excited to have you, man. Kane is he's younger than Klaus and I, but he's got a laundry list of bands that he's played with and is currently playing with. He's been in Revenge, Absolute Suffering. He plays 0 Hour, Crippled Father, Unholy Vampyric Slaughter Fest, Dilate, Vomit Forth, Bled. It's probably 5 or 10 more in there. Yeah. He's very active, very talented musician. I'm really happy to have you here, Kane. So thanks for coming on the show. We went back and forth a bunch of times to get you on, but you came highly recommended, and excited to have you today.
And you just got back from tour, right?
I did. Yeah. Dilate just did a little 5-day run with our boys in Vamakara, another band called Chamber. They're new bands. They're sick.
Oh, cool. Where'd you guys go?
Yeah. Just down to Toledo, and then we hit like Toledo, Buffalo. We hit basically like Toledo, and then a bunch of places in New York, and then we hit Long Island.
Cool.
Or not Long Island. Sorry, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, cool. Shows were a success, I hope.
Yeah, actually, we came back up, so I'm happy. Good shit.
Awesome, man. Yeah. So as you know, Stockbury Dark is, we talk to a lot of guests that come from underground music, artists, musicians, and so forth. I know you have some connection to the paranormal world. A lot of our topics hit on, the supernatural, the occult, ghosts, legends, anything that falls kind of under these dark topics. And we talked briefly about some things earlier. I don't know if you have like a timeline for yourself on where do you want to start, but I know we have some really great conversation coming ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's I feel like I've always kind of been open to something, even when I was basically like right when I was born. I mean, my whole thing that I really wanted to like touch on with this I guess discourse is mostly like the relationship between trauma and I guess you could say like the paranormal. Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of different like words for the paranormal, but it's like how realistically, how interested or open that outside force is to you is I think a little bit more important to how open you are to it, which, and I feel like a lot of the time people who go through a lot of trauma or are even born from trauma are a little bit more, for some reason, that those outside things seem to take more of an interest in those people.
Yeah, makes sense.
Essentially, I mean, when my first kind of experiences with these things are, after my parents' relationship, it wasn't like anything extravagantly like bad, but they were, without airing too much of their laundry, I guess. But my dad kind of always had this feeling towards my mom that she was like she owed him something or she wasn't really as good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I think that that's not like I don't think that's a strange thing, but I definitely think that influenced or maybe marked me or in some kind of way because I was their firstborn, and I know that sounds cheesy or lame, but I really do think that had a lot to do with paranormal events in my life.
Mm.
Oh wow.
There was like when I first really I guess started to notice something strange is when my dad built a house, and that house was, supposed to be there, like, he's like, hey, I love you, I built you this house, this is where we're going to die together, essentially, build a family, and this is going to be our life. And so it was a new house. There was really no history of death in the house or anything like that. And when I was a kid, I'd have this strange thing where I'd be in my room. I mean, I'm young now, probably 3-4 years old, and I barely remember it, but I remember looking in the corner of my room and closing my eyes and seeing my mom, and she'd have her arms open, and I'd open my eyes and she'd be gone, and I would keep closing my eyes, but I would still see her. And it would just be a really kind of a strange feeling, not necessarily a good one or a bad one. It was just strange. And
that's something this is something that was like repeatedly happening as a child.
Yeah, absolutely. Before my parents' divorce.
Right.
And I would also have a lot of reoccurring dreams. But, I was a young kid, and I didn't really know much about violence at that point. And I still remember these pretty vividly, which is strange, but it would be the same dream, but the person would be dressed up as something kind of strange each time, and it would be different colors, green and orange, and they would be dressed in all green or all orange or all red, and usually a primary color, actually. And they'd break into my house, and they would essentially just be trying to kill me. And long story short, I mean, there would always be bumps in the night, and I always just kind of chalked it up to being a kid,
right, and
being scared. And I also do think that had a lot to do with it, because my parents weren't getting along. And I didn't really know that, but as hindsight's 20/20, and I think that their friction or their anger really, really permeated the whole house. Because even my big brother, who he's 7 years older than me, 8 years older than me, so he is like conscious at this point, and he later in life told me, he's like, man, that house was fucked up. And I was like, it's weird that you say that, because it didn't have a history.
It was just like would you say it was like a real heavy feeling in the house, like tension, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, looking back on it too, I definitely remember seeing. That was definitely the first time I would see any kind of apparition or anything like that. It would be lumps in the dark. Like maybe it could be someone hunched over, but it was really not really humanoid. It was very, very like
just
an ambiguous shape. Yeah, but I mean, when you're a kid, you chalk it up to being scared of the dark or something like that. But a lot of this, this followed me throughout, because my parents got a divorce, really messy divorce. And, my mom kind of just took us one day, and she ended up being with this dude, kind of a douchebag, whatever, regular ass story.
Yeah.
He ends up dying. It's pretty violent. And my mom bought a house that actually did have a lot of history, that did have deaths in the house and stuff like that. And when we moved in there,
this is Massachusetts.
This is Western Mass, near Troy, New York.
Okay.
Essentially, it's Eastern New York, but it's still Massachusetts.
Oh, so you're like heading like way up, like what is that, Route 9?
9, yeah. It's like in Adams. I started in Pittsfield, and then my mom bought a house in Adams, which is about a half hour away. And this Adams house had a lot of history. 2 people died in the house that I know of, and so at first, really, the vibe was pretty cool, but it was still scary. I still remember being terrified of that basement before the guy my mom was dating had died. That basement was absolutely like it was more than scared. I would be very, very, very scared of it.
How old were you at this point?
I'm 8 years old, and when we moved there, and it's scary, but I don't really, honestly, this is where the trauma really starts to come in. I can't remember a lot of that, like years. People tell me about things that happened, and that I had no idea had happened.
Yeah, especially at that age, things like that would just get buried, because you're so, I think with my kids now too, like they're the happiest kids, and they don't see much like anything like even fighting, never mind like any like darkness. But even if they do have some hint of like fear or evil or something like malicious, 10 minutes later, you know, they could be playing in the corner. They could be so distracted and swayed from that.
Yeah.
And it's instantly gone, you know. So as a child, like any of these dark feelings, most of the time, they're just buried because you're so easily swayed and open to just like trying to be a kid and having fun, and that those things kind of just go.
For sure.
Yeah, because they absorb everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, I mean, what it comes down to is, for me at least, is like, it was with trauma, is like your, not necessarily your body, but, and you know, this is a maybe like a taboo word for a lot of people, but your soul, or whatever you want to call it, the thing that was you before you were, you know, whoever, you know, before I was Kane, I was still an entity. That thing at that stage in your, you know, physical development or your causal development will shield you as much as it can.
Yeah.
Because you're closer to birth or death, however you want to look at it. You're closer to that existence, so you actually have a little bit of a stronger sense of that self, I guess you could say. I don't really know how to word it.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I agree 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that I don't remember much about it, but even up until literally probably a couple months ago, I was very hazy about how my mom's ex-boyfriend had died, because he had gotten into a motorcycle accident, and my mom came in the house and she had a lot of blood on her. And I thought that was how he died, but that's not how he died. He actually died 2 weeks later. And it was from the head trauma. But if you can imagine, I mean, that trauma really, I think, started to shake things up in that house that had, I mean, we're taking the trauma from my parents' divorce, and that house that, you know, was permeated with anger and darkness, or whatever, however you want to call it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, my mom transferred that to a house that already had its own history, and add this, you know, new stuff. It really, really permeated. The house was thick.
So you think that opened that up to something else?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that's when my life really started to change paranormal wise. I remember very vividly, this is where memory is really not too hazy, is when I'm 12 years old. When he died, you know, my mom fell into a really deep depression and wouldn't even really talk to us. We just kind of lived in our rooms. And, you know, her boyfriend would get up early in the morning because he was like do construction jobs. So he'd be up, I don't know, like 3, 4, getting ready because he'd have to be out the door. And we could hear him getting ready for like 2 weeks afterward. Everybody.
Wow.
You know, and to play look at it the other way too, you know, that could be why things get murky and people are like not, I guess you could say, like, I don't really like that term, but people who are like non-believers or don't believe in things like that is like, you know, it's similar to hysteria. You all just went through this trauma and your mind is kind of filling in the spaces, you know, where he wasn't there. Now your mind's filling in the spaces, but that's not necessarily how I look at it. I think that really because my mom has her own experiences with this, but we could hear him getting ready. And I remember just feeling like absolute shit and being down in the basement. I would go down in the basement because I just didn't want to be around people. And the basement there was windows that were up towards the ceiling of the basement that you could see the outside. And I distinctly remember seeing his like Timberland boots, like walking past it.
Wow.
And it could have just been, you know, being a kid, because I'm 12 years old at this point and I just went through a lot. So it could have been that, but things actually after that calmed down a little bit, but life was still rocky. You know, that was where I started to get in trouble, you know, started doing bad shit, smoking weed, doing whatever. And not too many paranormal things happened until I actually stopped. I stopped smoking weed, stopped drinking, you know, I'm still straight edge. And I remember 15 years old in high school is when I started getting like being conscious of darkness, I guess you could say, and getting into like your more run of the mill Satanism stuff, Anton LaVey, even like necromancy and stuff. Like that's where I found out about the concept of like the river Styx, and I also started reading a lot of like Marquis de Sade, and I don't know why I was attracted to these things. And I remember one night I was reading 120 Days of Sodom, and granted that I don't know if you guys have ever read that, but it'll like fuck you up. It's like really like, dark. And I remember it was like probably like 10 or 11 at night, and I'm in eighth. Actually, yeah, no, I'm actually I'm younger than 15 now, probably like 13 or something like that. This is the first time I noticed that I wasn't in control of something. I had read that, and I had this crazy night where I was like, in my head, I could hear talking, but I couldn't. It was just talking. I couldn't hear
decipher the words or anything.
Not at all. Yeah,
Wow.
It was just, and it was I couldn't control it, and maybe I was tired, maybe whatever, but I couldn't control it. And I remember having this realization, in this house, all my paranormal experiences were very like surreal. It was almost like a Dali painting or something. I had this realization that there was two severed heads in my pillow, and I was like, oh my God, they're trying to like bite my head off. And the second I had that realization, I heard laughing in my head, and I was like, so like I actually fell back on like my Christian background and started praying, and it went away. And I remember being terrified. And the next day in school, at this point in my life, I had like kind of a fear of cutting my fingernails irrationally. Don't know why. And
like a control thing, maybe.
I don't know what it was. But in school, I took my thumbnail and I cut my thumb with my thumbnail super deep. And I remember laughing. And I'm in 8th grade, and I didn't know why I did it. And I was like, I don't know. That was fucking weird. After that happened, it was like another time of like of silence with paranormal stuff for a long time. And I'm all the while kind of still get delving into darker things. And like the end of like junior year rolls around. I'm like, 16, 17, and nothing had happened, and I had just gotten a car. So I was like, I'm going to school late. Fuck this. Like, I can drive. So I'm laying in bed, and it's maybe 8 o'clock, 7:45-ish, and my mom's already gone. And I'm laying with my back to the door, and I can hear somebody walk in the house. And I was like, oh, my mom's probably forgot something, whatever. And then I hear somebody walk to the open door of my room, because it just kind of like swung open, not crazy, but that wasn't weird. There's drafts in the house. That wasn't a strange thing. And I could hear someone stop and right there, and I heard this kind of grumbling over my head. It sounded like thunder, or like two rocks kind of like rubbing together. It was really like grumbling and overwhelming, and I had an overwhelming feeling of like kind of dread. And that was the first time I experienced any kind of sleep paralysis, and it was so terrifying. I could not, because I knew I had actually researched that, the whole old hag.
Yep.
And I read about that a couple of years ago, so I kind of knew what was happening. But when it happens to you, it's scary, and it scared the shit out of me. And I didn't know if I'd ever be able to move again.
There's no preparing for that, right?
No, absolutely. I was terrified, I fought as hard as I could to get out of it. I did, and I freaked the fuck out. Went to school, and I kind of just like lost my fucking mind. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And that's when things got a little weirder at my house. I started hearing things, and I really do think it was my mom's. I don't necessarily know if it was my mom's ex-boyfriend, but I think he had something attached to him, which was kind of magnified by the house, because it just got bad.
Did any of your siblings have any experiences during these times too?
I was just going to ask the same thing. Did you talk with anyone else about this stuff?
Family's always been kind of weird. And we all, like, my little brother and I grew up in the same house, but we try and be close, but there's a distance there. And to be honest, it's something I've never really brought up with him. I brought it up with my mom, and she has definitely had experiences. But with my little brother, I don't know how to talk to him about it.
Mm-hmm.
But my mom has told me some insane things that I had no idea. And she's actually, how this all ties in with traumas. I mean, the things that she went through beforehand, especially concerning love and relationships, are so intense that I absolutely had no idea about. And after with my continued research into, like, the paranormal or the acausal or whatever you want to call it, it all kind of fit into place, and it kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, made me a believer.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, after that experience, similar things started happening. Not as intense as that, but June bugs.
Yeah,
big fucking
big beetles.
Yeah, they'd fly into my window at night, and I'd think someone was knocking, but it wasn't. It was June bugs. But that never really happened before, and it'd fly in my window all the time. And right before, I had this strange experience because I got a VCR in my room, which was like we were, maybe not super rich. So having a VCR in my room in 2003 was, like, really cool.
Yeah.
To this day, I can't remember if it's a dream or it was real. And I was watching this, like, I still can't remember the name of the movie. It was like a period piece. It just got so disturbing. It was, like, so gory and gross. And this is just a weird kind of dream almost experience. I don't remember, but the movie just kept getting progressively more fucked up. And that's all I can really remember about that. Mm-hmm. And then once I graduated high school, my mom got diagnosed with breast cancer. So once that hit, I kind of I went a little crazy. And I remember there was a 2-week period, and this is my early 20s now. I mean, we're talking like 20, not even 21 yet. And there's a 2-week period where I was having this reoccurring dream again. It's these little guys. They look like almost like grays, like gray aliens, but not exactly. Really small guys taking me down to my basement, and they would make me watch porn.
Wow.
And I know it's weird. They'd make me watch porn, but the porn would get more and more like messed up, and people would end up getting cut up, and
so it turned into violence. I wonder if there's any of this even relates back to you at a younger age, starting reading, Marquis de Sade and like
I for sure
implanting those thoughts. And I'm not, saying these things are even things, but they put these thoughts in your head in a developing brain, and it's like there's things, as a child or as a young kid, these, whether it was an image or a story or words that I read or a movie that I saw that literally haunted me throughout life, which I know I would have had a different reaction to if I was a fully matured adult. There was a picture in a magazine I saw. Actually, it was a picture in a book, and it was about, I think it was Saturn eating his children, from Greek mythology. And he's holding one of his children, and the head is bit off all the way down into the shoulders. Mm-hmm. And I would open this book up, and the first time I saw it, like, freaked me out. I was probably like 6 or 7 years old, and I had this book. It was like a Greek mythology book, or Roman, and then I went back to it for the next year and a half, and I would just go back into the closet, open up and stare at that picture, and I would slam it shut, and it was like embedded in my brain for life. So even now as an adult, when I found that picture again, like it brought back those feelings to me of like this strange dark heaviness, because it was something I swear I shouldn't have seen at that age because I couldn't process it, and this was just it was like an oil painting.
It was dread, but it was also like pulling you towards it.
Yeah, well, definitely. It was like fascinating to me as well, Yeah. But it scared the hell out of me. So I would take these glimpses of it and then just like try to get it out of my head immediately. But I was always wanting to go back and like take it in again. So I can understand like, those types of things happening,
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
how you process them.
That's an amazing painting. And I mean, the gaze that the father has with the eyes. It's definitely a crazy painting, and also that kind of ties into how it's why did you pick up that picture? Why did you look at that? It's like the outside forces, they'll have interest in you.
Yeah.
It's that's always been really interesting to me. But yeah, and then so for 2 weeks I was having these dreams, and it would get crazier and crazier. And I remember looking up because we had a brook outside my house, and one of the dreams they took me back upstairs and they made me look into the brook. And as I looked in the brook, it got bigger and bigger, and there was these sharks and eels and horrible, like, kind of terrifying creatures, and I would just be scared. And I remember it was like 2 weeks of this craziness, and one of the nights I remember kind of having a sleep paralysis thing again at like maybe probably like closer to 4 or 5 in the morning, and I woke up, but my eyes were closed and I couldn't move, and it kept looking like someone was like shining a flashlight in front of my closed eyes, like lights that I could see. I freaked. I was like also in terror, but I couldn't move or scream or anything. And as I pushed harder to get out of that, because I had experienced this before, I figured, you just kind of push and get out of that. I don't really know any other way to describe it. I could hear a woman in my ear, like plain as day. And it was a really, really loud noise. It was like almost a scream, but it wasn't. It was more like like that.
Yeah.
And really loud in my ear. And after that happened, I snapped out of it, and I just took a shower for like literally 2 hours until my mom woke up. Then after that, the sleep paralysis got a little bit more frequent. And the only other time I really remember is I was laying on my stomach, which I never do. And in between my legs, I remember I was in a sleep paralysis kind of state, and I could actually move my head a little bit, though, and open my eye a little. And I could feel a depression in between my legs. There was like this fucking, I don't know how to, it was a floating like blue head, but it didn't look solid. It looked more like, when you close your eyes and there's a light on your eye, and there's
you can transfers through your eyelids.
Yeah, exactly. The burns on your retina or whatever. That's what it looked like. And I remember just being filled with such terror.
Yeah.
Same deal. Woke up, got out of it, wouldn't sleep in my room, went and slept on the couch. And then I remember the last night that I had this thing. It was a weird dream. It was really, really actually placid, very, very peaceful. And I was staring out the window in my room. It seemed like forever that I was just sitting there, and I had this realization in my head that I was like sitting on the devil's lap. And the second I had that realization, like I fell to the floor in my dream, and I woke up actually on the floor in my room, which wasn't necessarily that weird, because that I did roll out of my bed. That was super weird. But I remember waking up in a sleep paralysis state, having that like staticky feeling, that your whole body's just filled with static. I looked in my closet, and there was like I had a big giant computer monitor in there, and it looked like there was a little guy, and I freaked the fuck out. Left.
Was it like similar to the beings that were in your dreams?
No, actually, no. It looked like super humanoid, but tiny, and no features. It was all black.
Very strange, man.
Yeah, it was super weird, and this was also around a really traumatic time in my life, and I always try and look at things, like, hey, maybe this is, your trauma kind of manifesting itself, and you're tired and you're whatever, and
we rationalize.
Yeah, and I still try to. I like to play both sides of it, but doing more research into the relationship between trauma and paranormal encounters. It makes a lot of sense that if something was there, it would make itself known at that point. And so these kind of sleep paralysis things kept happening to me. There was another instance where I remember clearly seeing an apparition when I was conscious, and I was in a sleep paralysis state, but I fought through it, and I looked, and there was a really small, like, actually not small, it was as tall as a person, but very thin, like toothpick thin, and it was a black figure, and it actually spooned me, and when it did that, my whole vision went white.
Wow.
And
and this is after you came out of the paralysis?
Yes. Yeah, right. Actually, the only reason I think I came out of it is because it did that to me, and then I came out of it.
But you were still seeing it afterwards?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. But it did go away, like, quickly.
Yeah.
But
it's all right. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I really think this ties into my mom's ex-boyfriend and stuff, because I never really made peace with that dude because he died, and I fucking hated him, and I still don't have, like, a good feeling about him. But I do remember, kind of the last, because I was kind of living in my car for a little while, and I would go stay at my mom's every once in a while. And one of the nights, this is like the last dream I had with him in it, and I went down into the basement in my dream, and there was a party, and there were all these people. And I walked down the stairs, and it kind of clears in the middle, and there he is standing there. And I have this feeling of, like, when you see, like, your boy who you're, like, kind of, like, had beef with for a little bit, but a lot of time has passed, and you're like, like, hey, what's good? Like, fuck it, like, what's going on? I had that feeling, and I was kind of asked him how he was doing, and I don't remember what he said to me, to be honest. I just remember waking up, and it was like a strange, I wouldn't say it was a good feeling. It was a strange feeling, but that was the last time I ever actually physically saw him in a dream.
Wow. Very interesting.
And, and then actually, I think whatever, I guess, attached itself to him, or the trauma of him leaving, because I don't know if that necessarily attached to him, but I think that it was attached to the trauma in my life and my family's life. It's always been there, and it still is to an extent, but in my 20s, it really, is where I really started to research more and understand more and interact with it more. And I actually, now when I experience these sleep paralysis things, which is very rare, kind of know what to do. Because one time I just, pushed it as far as I could. I was like, okay, what's my worst case scenario? Worst case scenario, this thing's a fucking ghost. It's going to possess me. I'm going to fucking kill everybody. Well, it's not my fault, so let's fucking do it. And I just pushed it. I pushed it as hard as I could into it. Like, let's fucking do this. Like, what do you got? What do you have? And nothing happened. So that's when I had these realizations. I kind of really pushed my research into paranormal and stuff like that, and bought a Goetia. I bought a couple. I've had a couple in my life, and I don't know if that's necessarily the only way to deal with these things, but when I started doing ritual work, that's when, actually a lot of my mental health issues got cleared up, but also when I started learning more about, like, I guess you could call them spirits, or whatever you want. I don't really like to call it that, because I feel like these apparitions, whatever you want to call them, like even like a higher thought form, say like something that people call like Lucifer or like Belial or whatever you want to call them. They're thought forms that existed maybe even before the thought form of like Kane Galaznek or whatever I really am existed. And that's, once everyone forgets the name of who I am right now, they'll always remember that.
Yeah.
So, and there's a hierarchy, and I don't understand it all the way, but I do know that working with these things is kind of like working with yourself. And when I started reading a lot of literature about that, as far as this is like your rage or something, this is you. I mean, essentially, when you're doing ritual work, a lot of the time you're trying to inflict your will on others.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when I'm doing these things, I actually end up, instead of doing that, learning more about myself and about that trauma, and about like, I've really learned that trauma can be a really helpful thing in ways. I feel really, for lack of a better term, blessed that I had these things happen to me, and that the other side, or the acausal or the paranormal, has been interested in me. I feel like I've kind of garnered a more awakened sense of self through this trauma and through this kind of strange, wild ride with the paranormal. And I don't think everyone gets that. I think that everyone maybe has the chance to, but doesn't hold both. They don't hold the attention of the outside force, and they also don't explore it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it takes, there's a certain type of people who are kind of drawn to each other. Kind of like, actually, I think a good example is like you and I, Pete. We had all these mutual friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been a fan of your music for a long time, but also we haven't really met. But I kind of feel like we kind of have.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it just from the get-go, it's just very easy, you know what I mean? So it's I can see how you can relate us in that manner,
Yeah, and even with Klaus and you and Klaus, I mean, Klaus, you're in Sweden.
Yep.
I don't know how long you guys have known each other, but I mean, I feel like there's a certain type of person that will be drawn to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has a lot to do with these kind of outside forces,
right?
Whatever you want to call them. I don't really know the best way to call them, because I don't like to say spirits. I don't like to say demons or anything like that. Because
to me, it's just almost like an energy.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, I feel sometimes, and I don't know any answers by any means, but just how I can relate to that and explain it to myself. I always consider a lot of these things as a trapped energy. When you speak of like your mother, were they married? Your mother's boyfriend? Was it your stepdad?
No.
Well, regardless, when you started telling us about him, and 2 weeks carrying on after his death, there was these repetitive things that were happening where you'd hear him getting ready for work, or you'd see like the feet walk by the window, things like that, experience like that when people weren't ready to die. I feel like they get caught in these repetitive movements and motions because sometimes they didn't even know they were dead. And outside of maybe working with some sort of magic and invoking something, which is completely different. But with those types of things that we would call spirits, I think that's a lot of trapped energy. I think it's
yeah, for sure. And even like residual personality. I don't know if that's the right term, but it's similar to this is kind of maybe a bad example, but like people we'll use Jesus Christ. That's his residual energy or whatever is compassion in other people.
Mm-hmm.
Or his residual personality, or that's what obviously like the church would say or something like that. But I definitely believe in that. I for sure believe in that, and that's when like things like Lucifer, like the adversary, adversarial living is the residual personality of a thought form, maybe not even a person.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that the to go against Yahweh or whatever you want to call that, and that to live your life on your own terms is definitely not an original thought. I mean, I know I'm not the first person to ever think that way.
Yeah.
And where does that thought come from?
Yeah.
In the acausal. So it's definitely an interesting concept.
Yeah, definitely. So when you brought up a little bit ago that you doing like ritual work or ritual magic, what types of were you following through actual rituals through writings, or was it something that you personalized yourself? And what are your motivations for doing that?
So at first it was just like stupid shit, You know, like, you know, I thought some girl was hot and I wanted to bang her or something.
Yeah.
And and then it became more when I really delved into this. I was like, oh, okay, this is like way bigger than that. And it started out, I followed like the Goetia, and you know, to the best of my ability, because you know I don't have calf skin or I can't like make a sigil out of gold.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really, well, to me, like when I would read certain, you know, rituals where the ingredients that you'd have to come across were just so uncommon, and especially in 2019. Who knows, even 1,000 years ago, these things, you know, where you would need a 4x4 section of tin and 7 kinds of incense and any herb you could imagine, and certain types of glass and liquid, and how are you even compile all these things? And it always gets me to believing it's not truly the following of the ritual on point. It's how much belief you have in the ritual per se, you know?
Yeah, and actually I did a lot of reading on that too. That's when I started, because I started trying to do the Goetia, and I actually did see results. And, you know, but at the same time, it's like, I when I started reading why you would do that, and it's because the more intent you are on the ritual, like the more
focused.
Like, exactly. The more stuff you put into it is, you know, the more potent that energy can become.
Well, basically what it is, right, is sacrifice. How far are you willing to go, and how much time and effort are you willing to put into this? And I mean, it goes from all over the world. That has been the case with so many pagan religions. I mean, it's in Buddhism, but it's also in Norse mythology and what we call Asatru. I mean, the Allfather Odin gave one of his eyes for wisdom. So like on and on and on. It's about how much you're willing to give in order to receive.
Yes.
And I mean that's everything. That's everyday life. If I want to, how hard am I willing to work for something in order to get something back? So it makes total sense. But I was also thinking about something else throughout this conversation. And please, I don't want to get into deep psychology, and I'm as far away from a shaman as it gets. But neither do I want to like put words into your mouth. But I feel that when you were separating trauma and what we could call and refer to as the paranormal, then that maybe they're not supposed to be separated. Maybe it's the same thing.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And that's definitely something that I think about a lot.
Because it's a Western thing. And I mean, if in Thailand, for example, if someone gets into a car accident or motorcycle accident, they say it's because of evil spirits. And I'm not saying that person died in a car accident or motorcycle accident because of evil spirits, but maybe it's all linked together.
Yeah, that's what I absolutely think that. And especially, I mean, touching on like what even the occult is. I mean, I think the definition is like sacred knowledge or something like that, or hidden knowledge. It's interesting how that, and you know, without getting too into stuff, that is more universal, I would say, than maybe an Abrahamic religion or something like that. Because before all of that, we all had this in our own cultures, and
I agree
that knowledge is supposedly forbidden, but it's and also it's right now. I think a lot of, you know, when you get into the Goetia or any kind of magical system, they try and make it so complex when it's actually so simple. And that's, you know, when it ties into the whole car accident thing, like, is it really so far-fetched to say that, like, the car accident in itself is the evil spirit? You know, is it really so far-fetched to think that, you know, to be like, what's like a sin is to be selfish, you know? Is it so far-fetched to say that selfishness is not a demon, you know, is not a demon influencing you?
Right. I agree 100%.
It's really I mean, and you know what's really interesting is the higher up we seem to go in any organization, the more occult, or however you want to call it, there's more occult trappings or focus in any organization the higher you go.
And worship and like
yeah.
fake gods. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's got to be some merit there, you know. And I mean, look at CERN. You know, they have a giant statue of like Shiva.
Right.
You know, outside. I mean, it can't just be because it looks cool. Because I mean, these people, they're very efficient.
And they probably put some thought into it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would imagine. So it's interesting how I think that the occult and I guess like the paranormal is no matter what, like I had said before, it's in your life. No, you're participating in a ritual whether you're conscious of it or want to or not. No matter what, every little thing you do, you know, like my parents kind of fighting. You know, we get so wrapped up in the act of the ritual that we don't realize we're in it. And it's like my parents are fighting over whatever means or whatever, and that could maybe have been a ritual to consecrate that house to make it a vessel of anger and darkness. You know,
that's such a crazy way of looking at it. I don't even know if it's crazy, but such a different way of looking at things. You know, I've never come across. You know.
It's interesting. I mean, it's definitely the more I read. I mean, I've been reading a lot about a certain like a kind of order that's like they came under fire recently for they had some false accusations. So I don't really want to say what it was on this, but and they make a lot of good points with things like that. You know, as far as like, hey, just be that the whole because I know a lot of like LaVeyan people or even just normies too will just be like, if you don't believe in it, it's like you're fine.
Yeah.
And I don't think that could be any further from the truth. Right. I think the more you don't believe in it, the more it will be normalized in your life.
So since you like started really immersing yourself in writings like this and practicing some sort of like magic or rituals, has any of things from your past, you know, any of these experiences, have they continued or do they kind of dissipate?
They have definitely continued, but more so in that I'm aware of them now when I wasn't. Like, I mean, actually, well, I could circle back to, you know, when I talked to my mom about all this stuff. You know, her trauma, she had a boyfriend like that had killed himself even before that, like before I was even born.
Oh man.
And then she was also involved with a guy who, you know, may or may not have like killed a girl.
Yeah.
And so I mean she and it's strange how these kind of cycles happen because her parents kind of had the same problems that my parents did, whereas, you know, my grandpa was a bit of like a womanizer guy, you know, thought he was better, and that definitely manifested in their childhood. And the more readings I did, you know, on Satanism or whatever, the more I could kind of see, and you know, I kind of like how I said, I'm more grateful now because I can kind of see things from the outside a little bit and see how, if I wanted to, maybe I could try and break that cycle, or I could bring it to fruition and see what it is. I mean, I feel like a lot of the occult is working outside of morals, right and wrong.
Right.
It's really interesting as to what's right and what's wrong. I mean, we maybe might have touched on that in our conversation before the show, where some people think that, you know, some people of a certain religion might think that something is completely okay to do, and it's actually, in my opinion, like deplorable.
Yeah, I mean, outside of like cultural differences and religious, you know, itself, there's, I mean, countless things that we would look at, you know, that are just truly bizarre or outside of our moral scope, you know.
And I feel like a lack of understanding of the occult or the spiritual world can really maybe even, I know it hindered me for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't speak for everybody in the entire world, but I know that for me, when I learned more about these things, you know, I know it's cheesy and everybody does it. And I'm out of my 20s now. I'm 31, but you know, in your 20s, you struggle with depression. And I do think that does have to do with your hormones at that time in your life.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that carried into like, you know, my 30s a little bit. And in my late 20s, when I really started heavy ritual work, like showing myself and whatever outside force that I'm dedicated, my depression is like, I mean, I can look at it from the outside and I don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great thing, especially if it does such like wonders for you from being in that state. You know, it's everyone has their own medicine.
Absolutely.
And also maybe by adding rituals yourself into the everyday life, the ones that went unnoticed and were bad become superficial for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's a really interesting concept. Yeah. Rituals are really, really, such a complex thing for me that I'm also like really fascinated with. I mean, like actually, I think this kind of ties into what you were saying. There's a ritual that like Aleister Crowley did where there's like some mansion, I think in Scotland or something, and he left it, you know, undone. And apparently that place is like just fucked forever now. It's weird how like something like that could happen through your will. You know what I mean? It's rituals are interesting, and I don't think I think that even very mundane things could be rituals, or are rituals. And we kind of as a society look at that word ritual and think, you know, oh well, it's got to be like you're killing somebody or like, you know,
right.
you're doing something like that.
You know, a lot of times it has a very negative connotation to it. You're right.
Mm-hmm. It's strange, and I mean, even if you look at the Catholic Church, I mean, it's full of rituals that they themselves had kind of condemned for a long time. I mean, using candles was like a big deal for them because that's the old ways. That's a pagan thing. And
their idols, and you know, the Catholic Church to me is always. I grew up Catholic, went to Catholic school my whole life. It's very still fascinating to me. It seems very occult to me.
Yeah, me too.
On so many levels, you know, and it's just like a major like interest of mine. You know, there's just so there's a lot of mystery to it, and there's a lot of so many levels of it too. Outside of all the negative and all the terrible things the church has done, there's also this like part of it that is just so like. And I'm not a practicing Catholic or Christian by any means, but there's a part of it that draws me into it. In a lot of areas too, you know.
Well, we've talked about it before on the show that I mean, Christianity originally and especially Catholicism are pagan practices.
Yeah.
The Coptic Christians, or the Copt Christians of Egypt, were pagans, and they were viewed as pagans by the Roman Empire.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, pagan comes from the Latin word paganus, which kind of translates to like those on the outside, or those far away. And in this case, people far away with their own practices.
Yeah, interesting.
So, I mean, a religion or a group of people that have been able, through power and through good things and a shit ton of bad things, they have been able to maintain practices and rituals that they've been doing for thousands of years. Whether or not they're like pure now or similar to how they once were, that's absolutely a gateway and a window to something that happened thousands of years ago.
Yeah, for sure. It's
unless it's changed a shit ton, but
yeah. That's actually an interesting thing is the change. A lot of people, I know that even when I, not even first, for a long time in my like occult practice or whatever you want to call it, I was very interested in like the genesis or, you know, the beginning or how things were done. And I think we should do them like the old way. But if anything's fluid and anything's ever changing, I feel like it's definitely like the acausal or the paranormal for sure. Especially when reading a lot of the stuff that I've been reading, you know, a lot of it is like chaos, like anti-cosmic stuff is just chaos. A lot of and chaos is fluid. I mean, chaos constantly, it is constant change, and it's interesting how a lot of people will even kind of write off the internet as something that is not, that could never be mystical or anything like that, and I really think that's the opposite. The internet is super scary to me and super paranormal to me. I think there's a lot more going on there aside from, like, I mean, this is getting into a little conspiracy stuff, but aside from surveillance, I think there's something a little bit deeper there that's super fascinating, super paranormal, and super scary.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And how shall I put it? Conflict doesn't necessarily create the nicest thing or the best things, but conflict absolutely creates the most interesting things.
Yeah, true. It's definitely paranormal's fucked up.
It was a good conversation, Kane. We had some deep thoughts in here. It's very good.
Yeah, I think this might be one of our deepest ones to date.
Yeah, we got in there.
Definitely, man. Very glad to have you on the show, man. So thank you. You're a really, really good guest, dude. And can't wait to hang out soon. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other, in person soon, and could have some good talks together. Look forward to that.
Yeah, for sure. It's gonna be fun as fuck.
Have you added a lot of these thoughts and ideas and maybe even experiences to the music you've been doing?
Only with one project. Only with Unholy Vampyric Slaughter Sect. Started out as just like I wanted it to, like, I was like, I want to be Behexen. Like, I just want to be Behexen. And didn't end up going that way. And then actually did an interview about how it really changed. It's making that music is 100% ritualized now. And as far as like, I always try and, this is going to sound super cheesy and lame, but it's true. I always try and inflict pain on myself when I'm doing it. And which comes back to trauma because in my belief, I think the most potent gateway or Nexion or whatever you want to call it is trauma for sure. If I want to make any art that's like kind of worth its salt, especially with a name like Unholy Vampyric Slaughter Sect. I mean, I can't, I'm not going to half-ass it. And I absolutely 100% try and do a ritual every single time I am creating it during the time I'm creating it. And
I respect that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I respect you respecting it because I respect your music as well. So I appreciate you saying that. But
now this project it's just you, right?
It is. Yeah, I had two people perform with me, and it that went okay. But I'll probably still have other people perform with me live. But I'll never let anybody else really in on that.
Yeah,
it's just too kind of intense. I know that sounds.
I'm sure it's very personal and
yeah, it is.
And one singular vision, which just told you don't need anybody else to taint what you are striving for with it. So I think that would be.
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't. It wouldn't be good. I've tried, and even it's tough to talk about this kind of thing with anybody, and especially in a musical context because everybody's gonna have. I've even dealt with it. Just putting out the music, everybody has their preconceived notions on what, I wouldn't consider what I make black metal, but a lot of people do, and they're like, this isn't metal, this isn't right. Whatever, and I'm like, yeah, no shit. Like,
I feel like even probably more than 50% of music that gets thrown under the black metal banner isn't obviously true black metal. There's so many
absolutely. Genres
and subgenres in that music. But there's so much more to it now. I feel like it's just widely accepted on a million different sounds that can just kind of fall under that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I feel like it's more. I'm in bands now, and it's not as personal and intense to me to put out that music because it's literally like a sonic ritual to me. As cheesy as it sounds, I mean that's what it is, and I try and I'm being as authentic as possible.
Well, this is the Stockbury Dark, so. To us, It isn't she said all. It's total opposite.
Well, yeah, I mean, that which is sick. Which is why I'm glad you guys allowed me to be on the show, because I mean it's really, when I talk about making UVSS, and there are other people who do make genuine, in my opinion, like terrifying music. There's this guy out there called the Mutilator, and he makes like power electronics, harsh noise, but it's like nothing I've ever heard. It's really terrifying, and I can tell that there's like a lot of true ritual work going on. And there's a few people I respect in that genre. There's this, I actually don't know the name of his musical project, but this guy, he runs a thing called VLF Laboratories, that he's an artist that also it's very ritualized, very very raw. I'm a big fan of his work. It's not for everybody. It's definitely scary, but I really appreciate people's work in this kind of music that is like not scared to push boundaries and is 100% like ritualized. It's literally like paranormal music. I know I don't know any other way to put it, but it's definitely interesting. I like it.
As for music with rituals, I personally believe that maybe the most intense stuff I've ever listened to is Current 93.
Love Current 93. Huge fan. Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
And I also feel that the guy David Tibet take that stuff very, very serious.
Yeah, he's very real. And even I don't know if you know Psychic TV.
Psychic TV?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that dude Genesis Genesis Pure. I mean, I don't know how into ritual work he is now, but as weird as that guy is, because he's a fucking weirdo, he's real. I mean, that guy dedicated. You know, and I know he was early on. I mean, he was very interested in Aleister Crowley and all that stuff. And you know, I think he wanted to create a cult if he didn't. But I definitely respect his kind of commitment to his art, and I do think that there was definitely some ritual work going on there, especially in maybe not in the more pop stuff, but definitely in the more avant-garde stuff. Also, you want to know who is really. A lot of classical music, I think, is very ritualistic, especially Mozart. I mean, that guy was definitely in touch to something at a very young age. My big brother, he told me a story about how Mozart went to like a secret kind of symphony or something. I don't really remember the actual context, but he was like very young, probably like 12 or 13 years old, and he memorized the whole thing and wrote it all out because it was a secret. Like, you weren't supposed to know the music, and he wrote it all out. And he was like, "Hey, here's your thing."
That's insane.
Yeah, and I'm just like, it's really interesting how ritual work or whatever can be conveyed sonically that way. It's really, I always thought that music and creativity are also very connected to the paranormal or whatever. It's really close to the divine, because I mean, you know, God is, you know, or whatever you want to call it, God is a creator. I mean, that's what we're doing, is we're creating music. We're creating. That's a divine act, you know, paranormal in itself.
I agree.
Interesting shit.
Yeah,
David
definitely.
Tibet, though, yeah, that is fucking great.
Well, like we said before, Kane, excellent to have you on the show. Love to talk more with you, maybe on another occasion as we move forward with some of the Stockbury Dark episodes.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love that.
We will get to feature some of your music on this episode as well. We could talk about that afterwards.
Oh, awesome.
Anything else, Class, that you'd like to add?
Yeah, it would be nice to do a part 2 with you at some point. And we could dig further into music.
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah, I would love that.
All right, excellent. Well, this is the Stockbury Dark. We're signing off. Thank you, everybody, for listening with us today. We have a lot of great episodes coming up, and we'll be broadcasting very soon. Take care.